Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm Nick Neely, an assistant professor of English writing at Eastern Oregon University. Welcome to the Sandra and Carl Elston Ars Poetica Fund event featuring novelist Kirstin Valdez Quade in conversation with Claire Boyles. As people settle in, I'm going to drop a few links and reminders into the chat. I wanted to bring your attention to one more Ars Poetica reading and conversation that we have scheduled for this term. On Thursday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. Pacific, Catherine Standifer, author of Lightning Flowers, My Journey to Uncover the Cost of Saving a Life, which is about her troubled relationship to her own implanted cardiac defibrillator, and writer Emily Maloney, whose first book, Cost of Living Essays, which actually just came out yesterday and chronicles her experiences as both a patient and caregiver. Those two will be in conversation with an EOU MFA faculty member, Melissa Mathewson. And the link to register for that, it's in 3 weeks' time, is in the chat. You can visit our Ars Poetica page for events and videos of past events. Links also there. And finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's your thing. We'd love for you to see more of our past interviews with authors and readings. You can also follow us on Twitter. Thanks for entertaining all that. As we begin, I wanted to offer a brief land acknowledgement since many of us are in La Grande, where EOU is sited. We humbly acknowledge the original inhabitants of the land Eastern Oregon University is upon, the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Nez Perce people. We celebrate their traditions, languages, and stories. We acknowledge their continuing connection to this land, water, and community, and pay our respects to these original stewards of Northeastern Oregon. Thank you. All right, here's how tonight will work. After brief introductions, I'm going to turn it over to Kirstin, and she will read for about 15 minutes. Afterwards, Claire will have about 20 or 25 minutes of questions for her, and then we'll turn to your questions. We hope their conversation will inspire many questions of your own, and if you have questions, please submit them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you can remember to do so. They're easier to find there than in the chat sometimes. And now it's my pleasure to briefly introduce first Claire and then Kirstin. Claire Boyles, who will lead the conversation tonight, is a writer, mom, and former farmer who lives and writes in Colorado. She received an MFA from Colorado State University, and we are lucky that she teaches fiction for us here in the MFA program in creative writing at Eastern Oregon University. Her short story collection, Site Fidelity, was published last year by W.W. Norton and was longlisted for the 2022 PEN Robert Bingham Prize for Debut Short Story Collections. She has a novel in the works, also forthcoming from Norton. Her writing has appeared in journals such as Virginia Quarterly Review, Kenyon Review, and the Masters Review. She is also a screenwriter and a proud member of the Writers Guild of the American West. And now Kirstin Valdez Quade. She is the author, most recently, of the novel, The Five Wounds, her second book. It won at the end of last year, the Center for Fiction's first novel prize. It is also shortlisted for the Carnegie Medal for Excellence and the PEN Hemingway Award for Debut Fiction, as well as longlisted for the Aspen Words Literary Prize. Quade's short story collection, Night at the Fiestas, won a number of prizes as well. John Leonard Prize from the National Book Critics Circle Award for Book Critics Circle, the Sue Kaufman Prize for first fiction from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, a 5 Under 35 award from the National Book Foundation, and more. The book was named a New York Times Notable Book and a Best Book of 2015. She's the recipient of many fellowships, including the Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award and a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, the Best American Short Stories, the O. Henry Prize Stories, the New York Times, and elsewhere. She's an assistant professor at Princeton University in New Jersey. Here's how the publisher describes her novel, The Five Wounds, which is the topic of discussion tonight, and she'll read from. It's Holy Week in the small town of Las Peñas, New Mexico, and 33-year-old unemployed Amadeo Padilla has been given the part of Jesus in the Good Friday procession. He is preparing feverishly for his role when his 15-year-old daughter, Angel, shows up pregnant on his doorstep and disrupts his plans for personal redemption. With weeks to go until her due date, tough, ebullient, Angel has fled her mother's house, setting her life on a startling new path. Vivid, tender, funny, and beautifully rendered, The Five Wounds spans the baby's first year as 5 generations of the Padilla family converge. Amadeo's mother, Yolanda, reeling from a recent discovery, Angel's mother, Marissa, whom Angel isn't speaking to, and disapproving Tive, Yolanda's uncle, and keeper of the family's history. Each brings expectations that Amadeo, who often solves his problems with beer in his hand, doesn't think he can live up to. In The Five Wounds, Kirstin Valdez Quade conjures characters that will linger long after the final page, bringing to life their struggles to parent children they may not be equipped to save. Kirstin, it's such a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much. Please take it away. Can't wait to hear you read.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really pleased to be here. Thank you, Nick, for that introduction. And I'm really delighted to be in conversation with Claire. The last time we spoke was upon the release of her gorgeous story collection, Site Fidelity. So this is a real treat. I've been looking forward to this. So tonight I'm going to read a scene from the point of view of Angel, who's 15 years old and pregnant. And this section takes place at Smart Starts, which is the name of the teen parenting program she attends. And I think the only thing you really need to know is that she's very pregnant, and she idolizes her teacher, Brianna, and she has a crush on her classmate, Lizette. And I'm just going to look at the time so that I don't blather on too long. Angel pinches the underside of her chin as she thinks. It's journaling time, and Brianna has told them to make a list of things they each need to make their own and their babies' lives better. The first few are easy. 1, GED or high school diploma and college degree. 2, a support system. 3, a car. 4, a driver's license. 5, a job. Here, Angel is stumped. If she got a job, who would take care of the baby? So she adds 6, free babysitter, a good one. But there is no such thing, not really, not unless your mom or grandma doesn't work. Even Angel knows that. Briefly, she considers her father, then dismisses the thought. Christy and Trinity are whispering. They are best friends and knew each other from before Smart Starts. We got pregnant like the same month, they're always telling people, which is either a crazy fluke or an organizational feat. Both possibilities depress Angel. Who'd like to share, asks Brianna. Today she wears her clunky sandals and a shapeless maroon sweater dress that is too heavy for outside. Jen raises her hand, tucking her silky, mousy hair behind her large white ear, preparing herself for the stage. An education. Jen smiles, anticipating Brianna's praise. A cross dangles from her neck, and in the lobes of those stuck-out ears, diamond studs glint. Even though Angel knows they probably aren't real, knows she could get a pair herself at the mall, she's still jealous. Right, drawls Lizette. Education. I forgot that one. Angel grins and tries to telegraph her approval to Lizette, but Lizette's beautiful green eyes are half closed like a lizard's. On her left hand, Jen wears a promise ring with a dinky little amethyst. It's my birthstone, she said, as if none of the rest of them were born in months with birthstones. She's going to marry her boyfriend, whom she met at church and who picks her up every afternoon when Smart Starts lets out. He's a senior and works after school installing car stereos. And once he's paused at the curb, he never gets out of the car or even looks up, just attends to his own stereo while Jen climbs in. Not that Angel's own child's father is any better than a car stereo installing Christian. Her stomach churns whenever she thinks of Ryan Johnson, the way in geometry he always sat in the front row grimacing up at the board. He always raised his hand to answer questions, but was only correct about 50% of the time. It seemed crazy to Angel to keep putting yourself out there like that. But the next time Mrs. Esposito asked a question, there he was, long, skinny arms swinging in the air. Hey, he told her breathlessly once in the hall after class, I thought of a name for you, a math name. For weeks he called her Angle, or sometimes delighting himself still further, obtuse Angle. He was so persistent she felt embarrassed for him, which, along with the tequila shots, explains why she slept with him. Her embarrassment also explains, perhaps, why she hasn't told him the baby is his. Angel's back aches, her legs ache. She has to pee every 4 seconds. She's a manatee. She doesn't know how she can stand to get any bigger. Jen sits up straighter in her seat. Speaking directly to Brianna, she says, for success, I also need to maintain my relationship with Jesus and make my baby have one too. Angel pictures Jen forcing a recalcitrant toddler into the arms of a horrified Jesus. The Jesus looks exactly like her dad, and she laughs out loud. Brianna catches Angel's eye and betrays the tiniest smile, and Angel's cheeks heat. Thanks, Jen, says Brianna, and writes education on the whiteboard, the felt tip marker squeaking. Angel's parents are still together and teach at the community college where Jen, their only child, can go for basically free once she gets her GED. She's always bragging about how her parents kept trying to buy her an abortion, but she wouldn't let them because she's a Christian now. Could you please put up the part about Jesus? Jen strokes her tidy belly through her pink striped maternity shirt. I've been entrusted with this beautiful little life, and if I'm going to be a success, I need to love and care for it as Jesus loves and cares for me. Lizette snorts. Was Jesus loving and caring for you when you were bumping uglies with that dumb boyfriend of yours? Lizette, warns Brianna, but a surge of dislike has already been unleashed among the members of the class. You're not special, Jen, says Christy. Yeah, says Trinity, we're all Christians here. Ooh, umber, sing-songs Lizette. Jen's getting taught. No, says Jen, flushing, like half of you are Catholics, and Catholics aren't Christian exactly. Are you joking? Angel surprises herself with her cry of incredulity. But after all, she is something of an expert after her father's Good Friday shenanigans. Anyone who believes in Christ is a Christian. It's the main definition. Now Lisette looks over her shoulder at Angel and gives a wry half smile. Angel's happiness is like a ball popping to the surface of a clean pool. It bobs there, glinting in the sunlight. Jen stares forward, face splotched. That is true, says Brianna, and anyway, I'm agnostic. But girls, let's please stay on task. What's something else you can do to make your futures better? Sleep, says Tabitha sadly, age 17 and due next month, already possessed of a 19-month-old who is known in the baby room for his powerful lungs and disinclination to nap. I never get no sleep. Good, yes, sleep is essential, self-care in general. Other thoughts? Yesenia raises her hand. Marry a rich guy, Yesenia says. This sounds good to Angel. Her mother once told her it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich guy as a poor one. Not that Marissa would know, along with the rest of his personality deficiencies, Mike isn't rich. The problem, her mother conceded with a sigh, is meeting one. Angel starts to add rich guy to her own list, but catches Brianna's expression. Instead of that smile of bright approval with which she usually rewards classroom participation, Brianna presses her lips and gives an equivocating waggle of her head. Marry a rich guy is apparently the wrong answer. Well, Brianna says, that's one thought, Yesenia. I like that you're thinking of the practicals. But if you're dependent on someone else for those things, then you aren't developing the skills you need to provide for yourself. And if that rich guy, I don't know, leaves or dies or divorces you or proves to be a bad partner so that you have to leave him, then you're right back where you started. But he'd have to give me alimony, Yesenia points out. He'd have to pay child support. Sure, snorts Christy, because guys pay child support. Guys are super at that. He'd be rich. Of course he'd pay. It would be no big deal if he was rich. If he was rich, Christy says, he'd have lawyers and he'd know how to get out of it. You wouldn't see a cent. True, chimes Christy. Brianna's head is tilted thoughtfully. Angel presumes she is trying to work out how to validate Yesenia's point and at the same time crush it and move on. Angel is pretty sure that they're all imagining this man in his slim wool suit and narrow black shoes, looking like a Banana Republic model. And it strikes her as unfair that they're passing these judgments on him just because he's square-jawed, with soft focus eyes and a leather wallet filled with platinum cards. Angel also feels sorry for Yesenia having to defend what is objectively a good idea. Because who's to say Mr. Banana Republic would definitely be a dick? He might be decent. And they're all speaking hypothetically anyway. Any discussion of their futures is by definition hypothetical. So why not let Yesenia marry some hypothetical rich guy who happens not to be a dick? If they're going to be strictly realistic, then yes, Mr. Banana Republic probably has other plans for his life than taking care of Yesenia and her not very attractive 8-month-old infant. And if by some miracle Yesenia does convince him to marry her, then yes, it's probably just a matter of months before he fucks her over. But if they're going to be strictly realistic, then they might as well acknowledge that number 5 on Angel's list, a job, is unlikely to end up being the kind of job that will cover food, rent, health insurance, childcare, utilities, and car payments, and also allow her to sock 10% away into her savings account, at least not at first. Angel tries to get up the courage to defend Yesenia. After all, Brianna has told them that it takes a village and don't underestimate the power of community. And remember, people are resources too. But the thought of contradicting Brianna makes her nervous. Lisette takes a long drink from her water bottle before dropping it hard on her desk. The gesture isn't aggressive, simply careless, but it's loud. You're the one who said we had to get us a support system, miss, says Lisette. I don't see what's the matter with getting a rich support system. Yes, thinks Angel, vindicated, her point exactly. There's nothing the matter with it, Lisette. Please raise your hand. Brianna moves over to the list of rules, which they arrived at collaboratively with quite a bit of directorial input from Brianna, and taps number 3, raise hand during discussion, so we all have a voice. Brianna turns back to the class. I hope you'll all be fulfilled in your relationships, but today I want us to focus on the things that you right now can do to improve your lives and your baby's lives. We're going to set our goals and lay out a game plan for how to achieve them. She smiles expectantly. Yesenia slouches in her chair, her gold-digging aspirations deflated. Angel watches Lisette, who gazes out the window, conveying with her posture, her expression, her every cell, that nothing will make her ever care about anything ever. In the curve of her cheek, the full poutiness of her lips, she looks younger than 17. Angel wonders when Lisette was last hugged, when someone last made her dinner. All this talk of marriage is depressing. Angel is a kid. She doesn't want to get married, not yet, maybe not ever, not even to a Banana Republic model. She wants to be in her house, her own house with her mother, wants to make hamburgers in the frying pan and eat them together out on their little concrete patio in the white plastic chairs that warp when you sit. They'd bring the whole jar of pickles, dig them out of the juice with their fingers the way they used to before Mike moved in and informed them that it was disgusting. Number 7, my mom. I need my mom. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirstin. That was beautiful. I have so many questions for you, and I'm really so grateful that you came to talk about this book tonight. But I think where you've started with the passage that you just read, I guess I'd really like to start talking about the character of Angel, who, as a teen mother, and really, honestly, this passage that you read shows really all of the teen mothers who are there at the Smart Starts are really not, they're so aware and intelligent, and they know exactly, what their prospects are. They understand what their futures may realistically hold, even as Brianna is sort of encouraging them. And Angel in particular throughout the book, she's so specifically rendered, just her developing sexuality and her growing awareness of like the really exceptional flaws of the adults in her life. And I just wonder whether it was difficult to conjure adolescence in that way, to balance that sense of vulnerability that Angel really shows with also that sense of, you know, awareness and power that is sort of those key markers of adolescence.
You know, Angel was my favorite character to write. She was a lot of fun because she's funny and she is hopeful. I mean, some of the characters are a lot less hopeful. I mean, her father, Amadeo, he's really angry and he's full of self-pity, and you know, he wants to do better, which is the only reason, you know, I can root for him and stick with him as the writer. But he's, you know, Angel really takes her responsibilities so seriously, and she's always aware of her baby, who in the beginning of the book is coming, and then he eventually is born, and she wants to do right by him, and she wants him to feel loved and wanted and cherished, which is, you know, she didn't always feel that herself growing up. So I think that sense of hopefulness is part of what makes me like her so much and enjoy being with her on the page. Plus, you know, she's really critical of, as you said, the adults around her, and you know, they deserve it. I first wrote the character of Angel after I visited a teen parent program. I was working at the time for a nonprofit in Tucson, and the purpose of the nonprofit was to just raise the quality of early childhood education across the city, particularly in daycare centers and preschools that you know, catered to poor people who were, you know, having to have their children in these daycares and were often working three jobs, and so the organization was, you know, trying to provide teacher education and books to the classrooms. And one of the programs that we worked with was a teen parent program. And as a grant writer, I went and did a site visit, and I was so struck by these girls who, I mean, I'm always tempted to call them young women. They're not young women. I mean, they were girls. And by how, I mean, they were hilarious, and they were, you know, brash, and they took their job so seriously. And I was kind of blown away by just the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, and by how, you know, there was no self-pity. They were just like meeting it and trying to do a really good job for their children. And so that night I went home. I'd been trying to write this, trying to find my way into this short story that the novel eventually grew out of. And after that day, it crystallized for me who this family was, because I had Angel, and in fact, I used a line of dialogue that I overheard that day and put it in Angel's mouth. And in that moment, it was like the breath of life into Angel. But yeah, I mean, I really like young people. I teach. I really like being around young people. Yeah, and I remember that age really well. So that, I think that helped.
Mhm. I mean, I think that comes through so clearly in Angel's, really throughout the book, how seriously Angel is internalizing the messaging she's getting from Smart Starts. I mean, she really, almost near the beginning when she first shows up on Amadeo's door, she says something like, I need a support system. Like it's like she's parroting the language that she's hearing there. And it's almost, it's just so heartbreaking, because she's also really grappling with what she needs from her father and her mother, and what actually is and is not forgivable in terms of what they have not been able to provide her in the past and what they can't provide her now. And I just wonder how you were able to sort of balance that longing that Angel has, to keep, because her story is, it's so hopeful, and the book as a whole ends up being very hopeful, even though the themes and the characters, they really disappoint each other, and the themes are really serious. But I wonder how you're able to kind of balance, like, how much she wants, even in the passage you just read, my mom, I need my mom, who she is not speaking to at that point, who she has left, with that sense of hopefulness, sorry.
I mean, I don't know exactly, except that I think, I feel both hope and hopelessness on a regular basis. So that state of mind is sort of familiar to me. And, I do think, they can coexist. And, the thing that Angel, it's not just, Angel isn't just aware of what her parents can't give her, but also what the community can't, what her country can't. I mean, and that's one of the things that, the girls end up realizing is that, at one point, Brianna assigns this country report to talk about, like, parenting practices in other countries. And Angel does a report on Finland, and with Lizette, and the other girls hear about all the supports, the childcare, the, like, baby box full of, everything the child needs for the full first year, and the parental leave and all of that. And they're really angry, and they should be angry, because, I think one of the difficult things about nonprofits and about the sort of system that we have in this country, where a lot of really essential basic work, to keep families afloat, it gets thrust onto these badly funded nonprofits that just don't have the funding or the reach or the resources to provide those things. And, so a lot of what Brianna's teaching them is this sort of, like, goal setting, and, like, but it's this lesson of, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And when the cards are stacked against these kids, and their families, and I think it's something Brianna struggles with as the teacher, because she's aware of, actually what she can give them is pretty limited. But then the girls learn that too, and they are angry, and they should be. I'm angry about it.
Yeah, me too. I want to talk about Brianna, since we've kind of, you sort of set us right in that Smart Starts program. And I have a couple questions about her. She's the only close third perspective we get who's not a member of the family. There are 4 speakers that we hear from throughout the book, and she's one of them. And I was interested in that choice that you made, and I wondered how you arrived at that, where some of the other family members, like Marissa, Angel's mom, and Teotihuacan, we get them through Angel, and we get them through Yolanda and the other characters. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that process of deciding who in a story like this gets a voice, and why.
Sure. Well, in the very, very, very long draft that I submitted to our editor, Teotihuacan actually did have a point of view, and that ended up getting cut, because it wasn't as essential to the story. Brianna, I had as a point of view character pretty early on in the process. And I think one of the reasons for that is that I didn't want it to become claustrophobic. I didn't want the story to be only within the family and the family's reality and the family's dynamic. I wanted to let the broader world in. And Brianna really is an outsider. I mean, she's from Oregon. And so she's an outsider to Espanola. She's new. She's white. She's very young. She's just graduated from college, and she's really idealistic and energetic, and has high hopes for her job. And she's also, she's very much an outsider to this community. And so I wanted through Brianna to open it up a little bit, to open the story up a little bit, to let more of the wider world in.
I think that, that worked really, really well to kind of come out into that world. The other thing I really love, there's really moments of humor throughout this book, but Brianna's entire premise is sort of a humorous premise. She's a 25-year-old virgin who's in charge of teaching these teen moms or future teen moms how to run their lives. And when we first meet her, she's dealing with the character of Lizette, who's the girl that Angel is really in love with, who's performing a blowjob on a banana, and she has to go out and deal with that with very little authority and with a lot of, at one point she's like, well, that's disrespectful. And Lizette is like, to who? To the banana? And it's these moments of humor are throughout, even in the family relationships. But I wonder if you can talk about how intentional that was, if that was something that just came to you, inhabiting these characters as you were writing them, or if it was something that was sort of retrofit back into the book, which, to sort of lighten some of the very serious themes that we're dealing with. I think it works brilliantly. I'd just love to know what your process was for including it.
The humor was there from the beginning. I think it was always sort of baked into the DNA of this family and of the story I was telling. Partially because it is how I experience the world. The most difficult points in my own life and in the lives of my family members, and are in the saddest, hardest times, there have always been moments of hilarity, and the two just coexist in my experience. I think also I would not have been able to write this book without humor, because there are really hard things. Amadeo is an alcoholic who's been estranged from his daughter. He's not been a part of her life. Angel is in a lot of ways a kid in crisis, and her mother's boyfriend is horrible, and she's dealing with a lot. They're all dealing with a lot. It doesn't spoil anything to say that Yolanda, Angel's grandmother and Amadeo's mother, finds out before the book even begins that she has a brain tumor and it's terminal. So these are all really weighty, hard subjects, and I just think it would be such a drag if there were moments of humor. But again, it never occurred to me to not write this with humor, because there were elements of it that were funny to me from the beginning, and that the characters found funny. They were always And that was who the characters were when they sort of, became themselves.
That, yeah. Really, all of them are. I mean, Angel in particular, she's funny because she's so cutting. She's not afraid to say to Amadeo or Marissa, like, or anyone really, like the things that are, except Brianna. Brianna kind of has this special place in Angel's heart, and so she's not as honest in those situations. But I wonder if we could, like, Amadeo is really a truly infuriating human in this book. I mean, he disappoints everyone over and over, including himself, which is really heartbreaking. And I'm sure, like, I'm not alone in this as readers of this book, that I just found myself rooting for him so deeply. And I think it would have been maybe easy for you as a writer to treat him with a little bit less compassion and kind of be a little, not that nobody is harsh to him. His sister Valerie judges him very harshly, and Angel is also pretty harsh. But I think that's a really difficult line that we walk in fiction when a character is so flawed, to humanize them without excusing them, and also to show the truth of them without making them too much a villain. And I just wonder if, like, from a craft perspective, there were techniques you used, or if, again, that was just something that came to you as you were writing Amadeo and putting him in these situations in his family, if it was just sort of a natural way of creating that character.
It wasn't natural. I had a lot of trouble with the character of Amadeo, and particularly, so the story started as a short story, and then much later, I decided to expand it. But when I was writing the short story, I was in graduate school at University of Oregon, and it didn't work. It wasn't working. The story wasn't working, and I didn't know why. My thesis advisor, Ehud Havazelet, who was such a wonderful writer and mentor to me, was saying, you have to go deeper, you have to go deeper. And I was like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. How do I go deeper with him? And what I realized is that the problem, the reason I wasn't able to go deeper, and the reason Amadeo wasn't working and the story wasn't working, it wasn't an issue of technique. It was an empathetic lack. I thought I was in his point of view. I thought I was feeling empathy toward Amadeo, but I wasn't. I was judging him. And I wrote the story because I wanted him to be punished. I wanted him to learn his damn lesson. And that was the sort of engine behind it. It wasn't empathy. And once I realized that, it changed everything for me. I was able to revise it. I was able to, but it was only when I recognized how much I was judging him. And, we can't do that. We can't sort of approach our characters from on high from this position of judgment. And, and it was hard for me sort of emotionally, because, I've known people like Amadeo, and, I was like, but I don't want to become him and really feel true empathy for him. I don't want that. But I had to, because otherwise I would have wasted all this time, and I wanted to make the story work. But that was really a challenge for a long time. And it the story was not good, and it was my own sort of lack on like a sort of deep spiritual level, that I wasn't willing to extend actual empathy to him. So but yeah, so that was a challenge.
Yeah, I mean it does come across so clearly in the book, in this finished book, that you've that he really he understands, like, all the way through, he's rationalizing his own terrible decisions, and he understands he's doing the wrong thing, but also, like, he's really kind of a baby. And one scene that really sticks out, the book starts with him, like the short story was really him in Holy Week performing the role of Jesus. And in the tradition of the area, he is actually nailed to a cross in the crucifixion. And he asks for the nails. He doesn't have to have nails through his palms, but he asks for them. He's sort of like trying to perform this sort of false redemption in his own head. And it, you know, he kind of feels it in the moment. And then in the book, we get the aftermath, which is he is in the ER. He's in the ER waiting room, behaving like an absolute baby. Angel is furious with him. And there's this moment between them where she just looks at him and she's like, what was the point of that? And like, I'm going to have this baby in a couple, like, how are you going to hold the baby? And it was a piece of dialogue that I thought, it's like what we always, you know, try to like tell students to do, right? It shows character, it reveals conflict, the emotion of the scene is very clear, it reveals Angel's longing, and it also really in this book foreshadows a number of things that are coming, because Amadeo really, for a number of self-inflicted reasons, is not fit in a lot of ways at the beginning of this book to care for Angel or her baby. So I just wonder, the dialogue throughout the book is really so often like that. It's so close to the conflict and the characters. And I just wonder, you know, do you find that that's something you can just draft right through, or does that take a few passes to go through and like kind of punch it up and make it more effective for the scene? Or like, what's your approach to having characters talk to each other and like the actual words that they say, deciding those things?
I mean, I think dialogue is really scary for me to write, because, you know, when the characters are in scene talking to each other, the writer loses control, right? I mean, when we're describing things and, you know, filling in backstory, and we're in, you know, our point of view characters' heads, we have total control in that mode. But once the characters start talking, then, you know, the balls are in the air, anything can happen. And I often, you know, it often feels like this sort of terrifying, breathless thing. So, you know, I always have to, you know, revise it. I revise and revise and revise anyway. Everything I write gets revised a million times, but that's definitely, dialogue is something where I pay attention. I want to make sure that the scenes matter, that they are consequential for the story. I want to make sure that you know, that often revision is just about cutting dialogue, cutting, well, not just dialogue, cutting everything, cutting what isn't working. Because, you know, I'll write a long conversation that will be realistic, but, you know, we want dialogue that feels realistic, that lands, that sounds to the reader like it's realistic. We don't want actual realistic dialogue, like human speech. So yeah, it takes a lot to, you know, trim out just the slack stuff, the stuff that doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I think that line about how are you going to hold the baby, I think I knew that Angel, that's why she was mad. But there's always the question, right, with our characters, like, a lot of times in dialogue, the characters are talking past each other, they don't say what they mean. And then when they do say what they mean, it's more powerful. So I wanted to end with her actually saying what she means.
Yeah, that scene had a lot. For me personally, I was like, oh, it was just so much, a lot of things came together in that moment, because it's pretty early in the book that this is happening, and he and Angel are still kind of like dancing around each other, and it was just a really clear moment of character for me. I have a lot more questions, but I have a feeling that possibly people in the audience would like to ask you some things also. So Nick, is it time to turn it over? Can I ask another question? What do you think?
Well, we have one question so far and we invite more. What a wonderful conversation, you two. Thanks so much. This is from Alexander Ortega. He writes, I was so excited to hear work from a writer with roots in New Mexico. When it comes to writers from northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, whose work do you feel yours is in conversation with, especially given the region's unique and evolving senses of heritage?
I wonder if Alexander is from northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. That's wonderful. I think when I first started writing about New Mexico, it was a little bit in reaction to a lot of the work that I'd read that had come out of New Mexico, written by outsiders. So, there is a long tradition of, mostly Anglo artists and writers coming to Santa Fe and Taos and the area and falling in love with it and creating all this art about it. So, Willa Cather, D.H. Lawrence, Georgia O'Keeffe. I mean, there's just a lot of art that has been about that place. And when it wasn't until college that my mother gave me Bless Me Ultima by Rudolfo Anaya. And that was a really important book to me. It was the first time that I saw like my family reflected in literature. And, I read a lot as a kid and all through high school and college. I was never assigned work by a Latino writer until like way, it was past college. And so that book was really, really important to me. But a lot of what I'd read about Santa Fe and northern New Mexico was by people who weren't from there, and often, my family, people like me and people I know weren't even on the page in those books. And so I think there was this sort of, when I first started writing about it, it was kind of from a place of defiance, like, well, I'm going to write about it. But I would say that my work is in conversation with all kinds of books. I am the product of everything I've read, and so it's in conversation with books from a whole range of writers.
I think you're muted, Nick.
I am. I'm sorry. Another question from Megan. Kirstin, your dialogue is wonderful, as exemplified by the section you read from. I know you said that one of Angel's lines was a real phrase you heard at the site visit, and maybe you might reveal what line that is. But I wonder how else you develop dialogue as a writer, a kind of follow-up question to your conversation about dialogue.
It's a good, so the line that I took from a girl at the teen parent program I visited was that heifer is going home. And we had brought in, when I did the site visit, I was sort of an observer, but another woman I worked with was leading them in a collage making activity of like food groups. And it was, I thought, a pretty inane activity. And so they were, flipping through magazines and cutting things out. And one of them was pointing to some spread about, I don't know which it was, but some reality show. And she said that heifer is going home. And I just loved it. And that was the line I took. How else do you develop dialogue as a writer? I think it's tricky and it takes me a lot. I mean, like I said, I do find it challenging. That's in scene, that's the place where I'm probably most tense as a writer. I think the best, I mean, one of the questions I ask myself is a question that one of my mentors, Elizabeth Talent, said that we should pose to ourselves is, what is the most interesting thing that could happen here? So what could somebody say that could really sort of knock this conversation off its axis? Because so often in our real lives, when we're having conversations, the conversations are pretty predictable. And we remember the ones where they're not, where somebody says something that makes us sit back. And so that's if things aren't going, if I've hit a rough spot in dialogue, that's often the question I'll ask myself. But again, like I revise and revise and revise.
Claire, I think we have time for a couple more questions from you, if you have any.
Yeah, I do have some. Following up on Alex's question about, place in your work in northern New Mexico and the Southwest in general. In this book, I mean, in the story, The Five Wounds, and in the book, The Five Wounds, it really seems like it could not have been set anywhere else. Just the cultural traditions that it's embedded in, it's really, with the Murata and the different things that Amadeo gets involved in with Teotihuacan, it just feels like something that could not be set anywhere else. So I guess I'm interested in just a general sort of sense, an artistic sense of how you see place operating in your fiction. And then also from a craft perspective, like how you manage to portray place in such vivid ways.
I mean, place is essential to my fiction and to just my writing. I don't, I have to know where something is set before I know what the story is. And I have to feel grounded in the physical world. I want my characters to, have their feet in the soil of a place. and so that I need that in order to imagine the characters. I never really, I mean, I often hear like, oh, the place is a character, it functions as another character. And we hear that a lot. I never totally buy that, because I think the characters are the characters, and they grow out of the place and out of the history and out of, all the pressures. So I'm absolutely interested in the history of northern New Mexico, and all, the long history of conflict and disinheritance, and I think my characters are who they are because of that, that deep history, and because of their deep roots in this place. So the place is essential to the characterization, but yeah, I mean, just on a craft level, the characters have to be in the world. They have to feel the air on their face, and it makes a difference whether the air is humid and chilly, or what, it matters. It matters to the physicality of the characters. And I think that's one thing, when I'm not paying attention, when I'm writing, but I'm not fully in the work and in the characters' bodies, I can forget about place. I can forget about the physical realities of them. And when I feel that, and I can feel the writing, the writing's bad when that happens. And the best way for me to come back into the work is to remember just, where are they? What is the light like in the room where they're sitting? And what does the air feel like? And, do they need a sweater? And, these are all the things that just help me get back in. So yeah, it's important to the characters and to the story, definitely. And it's important to me too, as a writer, to actually inhabit the world.
Yeah, I think those sensory details of the place come through really clearly in both of your books, which I've read and loved, both of them. But I'm interested to know, like, how much of the political and cultural aspects of place that are portrayed in the work had, like, how much research did it take to learn those things about the place? Are there things you just sort of grew up knowing, or did you have to, were you able to talk to people who were involved in the Marathas, or was it, did you read, like, did it take research? And if so, what type of research did it take?
Definitely. The most useful research is just going back to New Mexico and being there and driving around, and looking, because I think, even a place that is so familiar to me, I can forget to see. And, so I took lots of pictures, and I did read about the history of the penitentes in New Mexico. I grew up knowing a bit about it, knowing that it was there. And, my grandmother would say, like, her friend's boyfriend is a penitente, or, so there were things I knew, but I didn't really know, so I did a lot of research, and, most of that doesn't make it in. There's like a couple lines about that, but it certainly helped me. And just things like I have a phone book for Española, and I have a map, and so I have to look at exactly where the streets are. And if Angel is walking to Lizette's house, I have an idea in my head where this fictional neighborhood is, but I need to see, look, how long would it take to walk? And so the specific places, Las Penas is fictional, the Lizette's neighborhood, the Smart Start, those are all fictional, but I had to, in my mind, locate them in the actual map.
Yeah. Well, I think Nick is saying this will be our last question. So thank you, Kirstin. This was a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate your time coming to talk to us here at EOU.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure, and what a joy to see you again.
Likewise.
Thank you, Kirstin. Wonderful conversation, Claire. Such great questions, and Kirstin, we really appreciate you. It's coming out to Oregon at a late hour on the East Coast. Much appreciated. I hope everyone will pick up a copy of The 5 Wounds and spend more time with Amadeo. Thanks for holding up the book and this incredible family. And we'll hope to see everyone back on March 3rd for our next Ars Poetica event. There's Claire's. Excellent. When we'll host Catherine Standifer, Emily Maloney, and Melissa Mathewson then for a discussion about nonfiction writing, healthcare, and the body. Should be great. Thanks again to both of you, and also to Devon, who's our tech guru behind the scenes. Wouldn't happen without him. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.